Hello, y'all. It's your girl Vimbo, and I'm here with Teacher Talk. This is a new series I'm trying out because in my brain, I have so much, just love and respect, and my heart is still with all of my teacher friends. And so I thought, why not just share some of the things I learned when I used to be a teacher? Full disclaimer, I am no longer in the classroom, and actually, fun fact, I taught for a few years, and I was actually an elementary school principal for 5 years through the pandemic. So I have a lot of experience in education. And so, I don't currently work in education, but my heart is, as I said, with my friends who are teachers. So I want to share something that I feel like is helpful. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she is really struggling to make ends meet for her family. And we were just talking about just the different ways that could happen. And if you've been alive anytime in the last few years, you've heard somebody say teachers are underpaid and overworked. So I want to be the first to say, I totally believe that, teachers who work hard, do their job, all those things definitely deserve to get paid more. However, we live in this real world, and sometimes you have to do other things in order to supplement your income. So I want to share with you ideas of side hustles that actually work, and this is specific for teachers. Every single side hustle I'm sharing is something I have done, and I have found that it makes more money than it spends to do it. So that means I am profiting from it, because not all money is good money, they'll say, or sometimes I hate when I see this online, and it's so prevalent on social media where people I made X amount of dollars. Okay, you can make money, but how much are those people paying for ads? How much, basically the basics of business are you've got to be making more than you're spending in expenses. So I'm off my soapbox. I'm done ranting. All right. We're going to just jump right in, and I'm going to share with you some simple ways that you can make money as a teacher. Keep in mind, these are going to vary. And to be honest, when I was a teacher, and even when I was a school principal, I wasn't married. And so I do think a lot of these ideas are maybe slightly easier to do if you are a single teacher, ? But given that, there's people who are married and have kids and are still able to do side hustles, it doesn't mean it's easy. Just keep that in mind as I'm sharing these suggestions. So the very first obvious way to make extra money as a teacher that has worked for me is to tutor. I used to live in a really wealthy town in Florida. And in general, the residents of that town, it was like a retiree town kind of thing. And I was teaching there for a couple years. And I tutored some children at the library during the school year. So the thing about tutoring is it already uses skills that you get to choose what you tutor on. You can be subject specific. And in fact, I would encourage you to be subject specific. So because my bachelor's is in elementary education with an emphasis in language arts, my tutoring was for reading, writing, and I focused on lower elementary, even though later I did expand and sometimes tutored kids in middle school. So the big thing about this is if you are tutoring, I would definitely utilize your actual network. If you're in a church, if you're in any kind of social groups, and you know people with kids, use that to advertise. It could even be as simple as putting a Facebook post. And now, I have never done virtual tutoring, but I will say this. Since the pandemic, parents are so much more open to virtual tutors. And so absolutely post it on your Facebook page, have your network share it for you. And I think you'd be surprised. Tutoring can be very lucrative. You have to price it according to your area, according to kind of what you're offering. So you can say, hey, I'm going to help your child get up to reading level if they're below their reading level for their grade, or whatever it is by the end of the year. I know this was this was almost 10 years ago. But when I was tutoring those kids, I was charging $70 an hour, which sounds like a lot, but I was tutoring them one-on-one. So once again, it all depends on what you're offering. I believe you can typically charge more if you're tutoring one-on-one versus like in a small group. I also was only tutoring a handful of kids, and I was very specific with what I would help them do. So if the child was like a year behind in reading, that was basically my promise was I'm going to do exercises with your child that will help them get up to reading level. So when you can offer more and you know you're an expert at what you're doing, you can charge more. So I'm sure now, yeah, especially if it's virtual tutoring and stuff, that is absolutely its own thing. I will also say this though, and be very careful as about tutoring, whether you're in a private school or public school, make sure you know your school's policies regarding tutoring. In general, it is frowned upon to try to tutor your own students because that's a conflict of interest. You may decide to teach them less well, during the week if you know, oh, on Tuesdays I'm going to tutor Timmy. So just in general, it's not really like looked upon favorably to tutor kids you're currently teaching, but that doesn't mean past students you can't tutor or whatever the case is. So just look into that. I would say the number one, like kind of almost no-brainer side hustle job for a teacher would be a tutor. And even more, like if in the school year you're already feeling burned out and you don't really have the capacity to add more to that, I would strongly suggest considering tutoring during the summer, or even just having like a summer intensive in the month of June, where maybe you do a small group of tutoring with, you cap it at a certain number of kids. Depending on how you price it, it could be very lucrative, even if you were just doing it like once a week. So benefits to tutoring: you choose your own schedule, you choose your own pay, you choose your location. I would tutor at a public library, so everybody was safe. No one had to come to my house. Now you can do it virtually. Some cons to tutoring is it does take a little bit of energy to get up and started. And the second con is that if you're already feeling burned out by teaching, you may want to do a side hustle that is different than tutoring or something that's teaching related. So the second side hustle I actually wanted to share is going in a different direction. And this is to get a job that like a part-time job in retail. So you could work for a store in the mall. In my case, I actually got a job at a children's consignment store. And that job was like, that's a video for another day. That job was full of drama. There were like 4 of us that worked there, but all of these like women I worked with were always like having drama with each other. It was just really hilarious to observe from afar. But I really did enjoy working at this children's store. It was a really small boutique, beautiful store. I learned so much about swaddling cloths and baby chew bead necklaces. And when they're teething, you can like buy these necklaces for mommies that you put in the fridge and they're icy and your kid can chew on them. Anyway, working in retail was kind of fun because I would teach during the day and then I would go and a couple times a week and one of the weekend days, so usually on a Sunday, I would work at the store. And yes, it was kind of crazy at first figuring out my schedule, but after a while I was like, no, this is actually really, really fun. Like I am getting to interact with people, more adults than I normally do, because in teaching, I'm with kids all day. And it just gave my brain something different to think about, like organizing clothes and putting price tags on them and things I just don't get to do in my normal life. And if you're like me as a kid, I used to play like library and store a lot with my friends. So it's kind of like a childhood dream coming true. So my second suggestion would be to get a job in retail. Some pros of this job would be 1, you're getting to do something else besides what you normally do, which is teaching. So 2, the other pro would be you're getting more social interaction with adults versus the only adults you're seeing are other teachers, people in your field or parents. So this is more of just a different flavor of things. But a con, I will say honestly, was that because of my hours for teaching, I was often the person, if I signed up for a shift, like let's say Tuesdays and Thursdays, I was often having to close. So I would get off of school at like 3:30, get a couple hours at home to eat dinner, and then I'd have to go to the store to close from like 6 to 9 because I signed up for the closing shift because obviously I can't work during the day. So that would be a con for retail, but I think it's definitely a fun job. If it's too much to do closing during the school year, I would definitely suggest looking into it seasonally, maybe around the holidays, and or during summer vacation if your school takes off like 2 or 3 months, as we traditionally do in the United States. So the third side hustle that I was really nervous about including this side hustle in the video because I don't want people to judge me, but it's a side hustle I did, and it did actually make me money. So you can go into the service industry. I should definitely explain that before I go any further. You can be an Uber driver. So I had a wild summer. Remember how I told you I taught in this really affluent city in Florida? Yeah, so it was very expensive. My rent was way more than I could afford as a teacher. So here's the thing. That year, while working at that school, I was like barely making enough to rent out this studio apartment. And so I actually was working my full-time job as a first grade teacher. I was working at a consignment shop after school, most days of the week and on the weekend, one day out of the weekend. I was also tutoring. And then that summer, just to make extra income, I started Ubering. Now, I say this one with a grain of salt. Is this a side hustle you can do and absolutely make money? Yes. I have a lot of weird stories from my Ubering days. If you are a teacher, you know what Oriental trading. One time I was Ubering the guy who invented or created that shop, Oriental Trading, that like catalog. We buy a bunch of trinkets for our classroom when we have like a prize bag or if you have a fall festival. Anyway, I have a lot of really weird. He also tried to propose to me with a ring pop. Lots of weird stories from my Ubering days. So that is a side hustle I would recommend is a strong word. I would say if you're really strapped for cash, Ubering is relatively easy to get into. If you have no criminal background and you have a driver's license and you have your own car, it's pretty easy to get into. In the long run, I don't think it's one of the more lucrative side hustles to do, mainly because even if you're making a lot of money, I mean, sometimes I would make a ton of money on a weekend from just like driving on a Sunday. And I lived in a touristy town, so it was just a vacation town. That's like all of Florida. Florida is a vacation state. So people would be coming from out of town. They need an Uber from the airport, things like that. In the short run, yes, you might be able to cash out and say, oh, wow, I made like, a realistic day, maybe $100. And that would be working like a lot of hours, like maybe 5 or 6 hours. And around the peak times, right? Like early in the morning, maybe from like 9 to noon, and then doing an evening, like in the summer, the sun sets later. So I'd feel comfortable doing it maybe from like 5 to 8 while it's still light outside. And on the weekends, you can definitely make more. A lot of people, I would just talk with them and be friendly and be honest. I'm like, hey, I'm a teacher. I'm doing this for extra income. They would often tip very generously. It might be a $15 ride, but they'd give me $20 in cash. So was the money good? Yeah. I'll start with the pros because this is a pros list about like side hustles and how you can make money. The pros are that if you get to a certain threshold, I don't know what the current threshold is. And by the way, if you do this is not a sponsored post at all. Before I get to the pros and cons, I have to say this, or it would be irresponsible to recommend this as a side hustle. Share your location with multiple people, whether you're single, married, whatever. I did that. You can actually decline rides. This sounds really terrible, but if you know there are certain parts of town that are sketchy, you can. I do think you're penalized if you decline too many rides. But just be safe. I really recommend this one with a big grain of salt. If you're desperate and you live in a really safe area, safe is relative, knock yourself out. As for me and my household, I don't know that I would ever Uber again. It helped while it helped, but it was just so much mental stress of being like, I watched too much 48 hours. Like, is someone I'm going to pick up a rider, and yes, they're sitting in the back seat, but are they going to cut me into a million pieces? So listen, y'all. Desperate times, desperate measures. The pros, we're going back to the pros. What is positive about Ubering? The positive pros are you can get money relatively quickly. Like if you hit a certain threshold, you can cash out even before, I believe it was like weekly payments that they would do a direct deposit. So Uber, Lyft, whichever. I'm not sponsored by either of these people. You sign up for them. I would recommend doing both. I was signed up on both, but you just got to make sure one is turned off when you're taking a ride from the other so that you don't get two rides at the same time. But yeah, pros, you definitely can make money, especially if you live in a big city or close to a big city or by an airport, and you can cash out. So if you literally just need cash and you're like strapped for a couple $100 every paycheck, I would recommend it for that. The cons are, I do actually think in the long run, you don't actually make that much money per hour. So it's a lot of effort for, I'm not sure, so much reward, because you have to keep your car clean. You don't have to, but if you want good ratings and reviews from your riders, which helps you get more rides, then you're going to want to keep your car clean, which is more cleaning fees, more car washes than maybe you normally do, your oil changes and things like that. All of that stuff is just going to be a lot more when your car is what you're using to make money. So just keep those cons in mind. All of this to say, of all of the side hustles I've recommended so far, I think this would be the one I recommend the least, because I just feel like for most people, you're just taking more risk than I feel like it's worth. And I say that, I know it's maybe a little hypocritical. I say that as someone, when I travel, I use Uber and Lyft, and I'm typically traveling with people, so I don't feel like my life is at risk. But yeah, turn your Find My Location on. By the way, random, slightly unrelated hack, but this has helped me in my marriage because I have an iPhone and my husband has an Android. Pray for us, y'all. I'm still trying to convert him to iPhone. But Google actually has a feature where you can share your location using Google Maps. And so my husband and I share our location, and sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. Because the other day I was at the shopping mall and the Google location was telling him that I was actually closer to his work. So everybody just get iPhones and share your location with other people with iPhones. All right. Okay. Moving along. This is my final side hustle that I would recommend. And I have some bonus tips at the end, so you're going to want to stay tuned for those. The final side hustle I would recommend is if you are a teacher, and I'm just thinking of things that are things you could do, right? If you are a teacher, I would recommend being on Teacher Pay Teacher. This might be a little bit controversial. I know when I first started teaching over a decade ago, everyone, like, Teacher Pay Teacher was more new. If you're not familiar and you're not a teacher watching this, Teacher Pay Teacher is a website where teachers create resources for other teachers to purchase. So, for example, I have, I'm going to link my page below so you can see all the things I have. I don't have a lot. So this is what I would say about Teacher Pay Teacher. I know I have in my own shop some items that are good and wonderful. And the reason I know that they're good and wonderful is because I have used them in my own classroom. And oftentimes as teachers, this is why I think Teacher Pay Teacher can be very lucrative if you're a very creative teacher. And I have a lot of friends who are super creative as far as like creating their own resources. If you're already creating it and you're going to use it for your own class, why not make $1.50 off of every other teacher who wants to buy it for their class? When I was teaching, I taught kindergarten and pre-K. I went on Teacher Pay Teacher and bought whole bundles on there that were aligned with my standards that I was teaching in that state that I was living in. But as a teacher, that is one simple way, and without doing too much more work than you're probably already doing, that you can make money. Another example is I have a friend who during COVID, she's a teacher. She was just making Google slides with different questions of the day every day, or different quotes or things like that. Just be careful if you're using other people's material, like copyrighted material or a quote from someone else. Just make sure you're not like infringing on people's rights. So I think it just depends on what percentage of the stuff in your slides is your original content. So if you're making a quote slideshow and you're saying, what does this quote mean to you? Write a paragraph about it. If there's enough creative stuff that you're creating, I think you can get around that and not be just copyright infringing, but just watch that and be careful. But these are the pros of making content for Teacher Pay Teacher. One, if you are already making worksheets and quizzes and digital products, like digital items for your own classroom, it doesn't take any more work except for you to upload it to the website. So one, it could be very easy to do. Two, it's passive income in the most simple sense of that word. Passive income isn't truly passive at the beginning because it takes work to create the resource. But after that, I mean, even till now, guys, and my shop has only a handful of items, I made like $7 the other day. Now, it's been years since I uploaded anything on my Teacher Pay Teacher because I haven't been a teacher in years, and I was a school principal for 5 years the last time I was in education. So I just literally haven't made anything for it, and still I am getting passive income. $7 is not a lot, but I'm saying that to say if you have dozens of things on your shop, you can literally be making money in your sleep. The cons are people have mixed feelings about Teacher Pay Teacher. A lot of teachers feel very divided about it. Some think it's a really great resource for teachers. Others bring up really good, genuine criticism, which is that anyone can put something on Teacher Pay Teacher and call it educational. So my advice for that would be, if you're uploading something, make sure it's quality, make sure it's aligned with some educational standard. It could be the state standard, it could be Common Core, it could be whatever it is. It could be, just make sure you're using best practices and you're actually making something and not just creating something to be cutesy, right? So that's my advice about Teacher Pay Teacher. I think it's a great way for teachers to make money. So this is my bonus content at the end for these teachers who have stuck through this with me. Maybe you are spending the day folding your laundry and listening to this YouTube in the background. I'm just glad you've hung around. I actually want to share with you some ways that are not great side hustles for teachers. So I just want to share a couple of things that are not quick side hustles that I would honestly probably recommend steering away from if you are in education. So the first one I would say is I would honestly recommend steering away from any online quizzes or surveys or things like that. Comment below if that's ever worked for you. You can Google get paid to take surveys online, and in my opinion, I feel like it's a little bit of a scam. That's just me personally. I've never made $1 in the past. It's probably been years, but every time I've signed up for one, I've never found a reputable website where you can just take surveys to make money. So that would be that. The other thing I would steer away from, and everyone has different opinions about this, but specifically for teachers, would be websites like Upwork. And here's why. You can make money on something like Teacher Pay Teacher and just upload a resource once versus somebody hiring you to continue to do work for them. If you like that, then do it, right? But I just think those aren't probably the most effective side hustles for teachers. So I know this was a lot of information, but I am so excited for this series because, yes, I want this channel to be about fun, self-care, relationships, just what's in my mind as someone who works remote and I travel a lot and things like that. But I also still have a big heart for education and supporting teachers, miss being an administrator. I don't know, maybe at some point in the future that could be something I could see myself doing again. But in the meantime, I think it's always a good time to share just the knowledge bouncing around in my head about how to help teachers. So if you found this video informative or helpful, please comment below about what you've tried, what you find effective as a side hustle. Share this video with your teacher friends. Maybe my experiences will make you chuckle a little bit, but I hope that it helps, and I hope that you are able to more than make ends meet. You are able to thrive. You're able to go on vacation if you're a teacher and afford it and not be stressed about your bills. I just wish you happiness. And until next time,